Amelia Bennet stood quietly near the front of the old stone church, the weight of grief pressing down on her like the gray sky overhead. Dressed in a simple black dress, her hands were clasped tightly together, her knuckles pale, as she listened to the soft murmur of prayers and heartfelt eulogies echoing through the somber room. The scent of lilies mingled with polished wood and faint traces of incense. Her father's portrait, framed in dark oak and surrounded by candles, captured his kind, weathered face, an image Amelia had studied her whole life. Now it felt unbearably distant. Around her, family and friends whispered condolences, their faces shadowed with sorrow. Yet Amelia felt outside herself, as if observing a scene she no longer belonged to. The steady drip of rain tapped against the stained glass windows, a slow metronome marking time she wasn't ready to measure. Then, just beyond the circle of mourners, a movement caught her eye. A tall woman stepped forward, her pale complexion and dark hair strikingly mirroring Amelia's own. She was unfamiliar, yet the resemblance was unnerving. The woman's gaze locked on Amelia's with unsettling calm and certainty. Without hesitation, she approached and spoke in a voice low but steady, cutting through the church's hushed solemnity. "I'm the real daughter," the woman said, her words stark and unbelievable. "All this time, you've been living a lie." Murmurs erupted immediately, eyes darting between the two women. Amelia's heart stumbled, confusion and disbelief flooding her senses. Was this a cruel joke? Some strange coincidence? The funeral, meant to honor her father, suddenly became the stage for a challenge that threatened everything Amelia believed about herself. The church seemed to hold its breath after the mysterious woman's declaration. Amelia's mind scrambled for comprehension as Claire, her name, she eventually heard, stepped closer without an ounce of hesitance. Her eyes, sharp and unwavering, anchored Amelia's trembling gaze. The murmurs swelled into whispers, then fractured into outright questions and shocked gasps around the pews where relatives and friends were gathered. "I have every right to stand here," Claire said, her tone calm but with an assertiveness that chilled the air between them. "I am the legitimate daughter of Henry Bennet. Not you." Her eyes flicked toward Amelia's face like a challenge, daring her to protest. Amelia's throat tightened. "That's not true," she managed to say, her voice cracked and uncertain. She looked into the confused faces of her relatives. "I've lived as Henry's daughter all my life. I was there every day." Tears threatened to spill, but she blinked them away, feeling suddenly powerless. Claire didn't falter. "I have the adoption papers. The hospital records. I know things only his real daughter would know." She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a folder. A few family friends stepped forward, curiosity quickly overtaking their grief. Whispers turned to tentative questions about identity, loyalty, and truth. The room was thick with tension. Amelia's mother, a dignified woman whose makeup had begun to smudge in the tears, shook her head slowly. "Claire, this is not the time," she said quietly but firmly. "You're shaking us all. Let's not forget why we're here." Her glance shifted anxiously to Amelia, a silent reassurance. But the seed of doubt had been planted. Some relatives whispered about old rumors that Amelia had never even heard before. Had the woman's unexpected arrival unearthed something long buried? More than one family member avoided Amelia's eyes, curiosity gleaming with caution. Agonized and unable to stay on the spot any longer, Amelia excused herself silently and slipped out of the chapel into the cool drizzle that had begun anew outside. The rain blurred her vision, but the shell-shocked confusion inside her could not be washed away. Her mind was a storm of denial, fear, and fragile hope, but mostly, an aching need to understand the truth. She walked aimlessly, clustering thoughts and memories like fragile fragments. What if Claire was right? What if the safety Amelia had always felt in the identity she knew was an illusion? Her father had been a steady presence in her life, the one person she hadn't questioned. Now, she felt as if the ground beneath her had fractured, leaving her suspended in emptiness. Passing the old park near the church, Amelia sank onto a bench and pulled her jacket tighter around her. She reached into her purse, fingers trembling as she typed a message to her closest friend, Rachel. Something terrible happened. I don't know what to believe anymore. Can you meet me? Rachel's swift reply, full of concern, offered a small comfort. Knowing someone else knew her pain somehow softened the weight, if only a little. Back inside the church, Claire watched Amelia's retreating figure with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. She was not here to cause pain, she told herself. It was simply necessary to claim what was hers. But as she caught the wary eyes around her, she sensed the challenge wouldn't end today. Claire's presence shattered the fragile illusion of a family at peace, revealing fault lines that might crumble everything. Later, at the reception held awkwardly in the church hall, the atmosphere was strained. Some guests approached Amelia, offering sympathetic smiles, others whispered behind closed lips. Amelia could hear fragments. Who is she, really? What does this mean for Amelia? Could the family have hidden secrets all along? Claire's way of moving through the room was deliberate, sharp-eyed and composed. When approached by a few relatives convinced by her story, she calmly answered their questions, reinforcing her narrative with precise details about dates, places, and events that confused Amelia deeply. The woman didn't accuse loudly but planted seeds of doubt so skillfully that Amelia felt herself shrinking beneath their weight. Rachel arrived just as Amelia sat quietly at a corner table, her eyes still glazed with shock. Taking Amelia's hand, Rachel whispered, "You don't have to face this alone. We'll find the truth. Whatever it is, you deserve to know." The reassurance stirred a spark within Amelia, a fragile but growing determination to unearth whatever lay hidden beneath the day's revelations. Yet even as she resolved to fight for her identity, the doubt clawed at her confidence. Was she truly the daughter she had always believed herself to be? The reception wound down with an uncomfortable quiet replacing the buzz of grief. Claire's bold intrusion had fractured the family's composure, and none of the guests could leave without questioning what they thought they knew. Amelia left early, not ready to engage with the stares or the whispered judgments. That evening, alone in the dim light of her apartment, Amelia sat surrounded by old photographs and letters from her father, fragments of a once familiar past suddenly strange and inaccessible. She traced the faded edges of a photo showing herself and Henry smiling under the summer sun, hoping to grasp some truth in the image's frozen warmth. But the room felt colder than before. Her phone buzzed. It was a message from an anonymous number. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes truth hurts more. Amelia swallowed hard, images and words swirling in her mind, unable to distinguish fact from fiction. The question lingered, who was she really? And could she reclaim her life if that identity was taken from her? If you were in Amelia's place, would you seek answers at any cost, or protect yourself from the pain of knowing? Amelia sat in the dim light of her small apartment, the muted glow of a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls lined with photographs, letters, and mementos of a life she once thought was undeniably hers. Her fingers lingered over an old black and white picture showing a young girl clutching her father's hand beneath a sprawling oak tree, Henry Bennett's face soft with a warm smile. Those moments felt as distant as a dream now, blurred by the sharp intrusion of Claire's words and the unsettling claims that disrupted everything. A quiet restlessness gnawed at her. Amelia was no stranger to hardship, but this? This attack on her very identity felt like an invisible wound, a sickness of the soul more than anything physical. The notion that she might be an imposter in her own life was a foreign and terrifying thought. Yet, the persistence in Claire's voice haunted her, the meticulous details she'd shared, the way she knew intimate family stories that Amelia herself could barely recall. Doubt crept in with ruthless efficiency. Her phone buzzed again, breaking the silence. Another message, this time from Rachel. "Are you okay? We need to talk. Tomorrow. There might be someone who can help." Amelia hesitated, then typed back a simple, "I need help." She wasn't ready to confront this alone anymore. The following day, Amelia found herself at a quiet cafe, the comforting aroma of brewed coffee and the murmur of conversations a stark contrast to the storm raging inside her. Rachel arrived with a determined expression and a folder clutched to her chest. "Her name's Margaret," Rachel began quietly. "She's your father's cousin, lives out of state. She wanted to reach out before Claire showed up. Says there's some family history you don't know about." Amelia's heart pounded in her chest. Could she face more revelations? The walls she'd desperately tried to keep intact were crumbling. Soon, the phone call connected to Margaret, an older woman with a soothing voice and eyes that seemed to hold years of guarded secrets. "Amelia," she said gently, "your father was a complicated man, and your family has been fractured by choices made long ago. There are parts of your story you were never told, and perhaps should have been." Margaret spoke carefully about the past, a tragic accident years earlier, intertwined lives, adoptions, and separations that had reshaped relationships far beyond what Amelia ever imagined. She mentioned Claire, describing her as a child taken in by Henry's new family after unforeseen circumstances. The revelations tumbled over Amelia's mind, each new fact a puzzle piece that simultaneously confused and illuminated. "I understand this is overwhelming," Margaret said. "But there's nothing to prove to anyone except yourself. You have a right to claim your identity, however complicated it may be." That evening, Amelia wrestled with the avalanche of information. Part of her recoiled from boycotting the very foundation of her life, yet another part felt the embers of hope for clarity, for freedom from shadows cast by unspoken truths. Days passed, and Claire's presence intensified as she leveraged her narrative in whispered conversations among relatives and friends, insinuating that Amelia's version of events was a carefully constructed fabrication. Amelia felt the weight of judgment from those she once considered allies, as if her existence was now a contested territory. One afternoon, attempting to quell her spiraling thoughts, Amelia confronted Claire at a local park, the fading sunlight casting long beams across the empty benches. "Why are you doing this?" Amelia asked, voice shaking but firm. "What do you want from me?" Claire's expression was softer there, tinged with sadness. "I'm not trying to destroy you. I need recognition, the truth known. I've lived in the shadows, believing my place was stolen from me. All I want is to be acknowledged." The confession struck a chord in Amelia, stirring a complicated empathy alongside confusion and bitterness. Both women were prisoners of a family secret neither fully controlled, bound by loss and longing. Later, Amelia's restless nights were plagued by doubts and memories jumbled into a knot of uncertainty. She scoured old letters, medical records, and photographs, searching for any inconclusive detail that might anchor her sense of self. One letter, hidden among her father's belongings, hinted at a promise made years ago, one that Margaret had alluded to but never fully explained. A private message arrived just as she prepared to sleep. Sometimes the hardest truths lead to the greatest freedom. Amelia closed her eyes, the phrase repeating in her mind, mingled with the echoes of voices, her father's, Claire's, Margaret's, each pulling her toward an uncertain resolution. She realized that to survive this ordeal, she'd have to confront not only the family's secrets but her own fragile identity. The doubts raised were not just accusations from Claire, but reflections of her internal struggle, the fear of losing herself even more than the fear of losing others' acceptance. The question remained, was she strong enough to face a reality that could redefine who she was? Or would the relentless pressure crush the fragile self she'd known all her life? Have you ever faced a moment where every certainty in your life was shattered, leaving you to confront a version of yourself you barely recognized? Amelia sat across from Margaret in the quiet warmth of the small cafe where they had agreed to meet again, the hum of quiet conversation wrapping around them like a gentle breeze. Margaret's eyes held a mixture of sadness and resolve, the kind of look one wears when carrying decades of secrets, finally set free. Amelia felt the knot inside her chest tighten with anticipation and dread. Today, she might learn more than she ever wanted to know. Margaret took a deep breath, her fingers absently tracing the rim of her teacup. Amelia, there's something important you need to hear, she began softly. You were adopted as a child after a tragic accident involving your biological parents. Amelia's heart lurched, and she barely managed to keep her focus. Adopted, she whispered, the word foreign and heavy on her tongue. Margaret nodded, her voice steady. Yes. Henry Bennett was never your birth father, but he raised you as his own from the moment he brought you into the family. Claire was raised by Henry's new wife after she married some years later. A torrent of emotions flooded Amelia: shock, disbelief, betrayal, and beneath it, an unexpected surge of relief. The pieces she had been trying to force together finally fit somewhere, though the picture was far from complete. Margaret continued, the decision to keep this a secret was made to protect the children from painful realities no one was ready to face. You and Claire were raised believing different truths, and now, years later, both of you are caught in the crossfire of those choices. Amelia felt tears burn her eyes. The calm certainty she had clung to shattered beneath the weight of Margaret's words. It wasn't a lie, but it was a labyrinth she never imagined navigating. Later, armed with this revelation, Amelia arranged to meet Claire at a quiet park bench, away from prying eyes, away from whispers and judgment. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the empty playground and igniting the sky with hues of orange and purple. Amelia's hands trembled as she waited. Claire arrived, her face a mosaic of wariness and vulnerability. So, she began quietly, what did you learn? Amelia swallowed hard. Margaret told me. I was adopted. Henry wasn't my biological father. But he raised me. Claire's expression softened ever so slightly, the sharp edges of rivalry blurring into something fragile. That explains a lot, she said. I was raised believing I was the only daughter, but I always wondered why there were so many secrets, and now I see why. The two women sat in contemplative silence. For the first time in weeks, the tension between them eased. They were no longer opponents but two people entangled in a family tragedy neither had chosen. The shared pain was a fragile bridge connecting their fractured histories. Maybe, Amelia said with cautious hope, we don't have to fight over something we both lost in different ways. Claire nodded, eyes glistening with unshed tears. I want to know the truth, Amelia. Not for anyone else, but for me. Their fragile truce was punctuated by a message from Margaret, the family is ready to meet you both. It's time for everyone to face this together. As Amelia and Claire prepared for the meeting, nerves and doubt wrestled within them. The coming confrontation held the promise of healing or deeper fracture. Questions swirled. Could honesty repair decades of silence? Would the family accept the tangled truths? What would you do if the foundation of your identity was altered overnight? Would you fight to reclaim your place, or seek understanding in uncertain forgiveness? The story poised on the edge of revelation, anticipation thick in the air as Amelia and Claire braced for the family reunion that might finally bring closure, or shatter everything anew. The afternoon sun poured through the windows of the Bennett family home, casting warm light on faces etched with years of hidden pain and unspoken questions. The living room was filled with an uneasy silence as Amelia and Claire entered together, the weight of their shared history pressing down on everyone present. This was the moment the family had long avoided, the reckoning born of secrets kept for too long. Amelia's heart hammered as she scanned the faces, her mother's eyes glistening with cautious hope, Margaret's steady gaze, and relatives whose expressions wavered between skepticism and tentative acceptance. Claire stood beside her, no longer an adversary but a companion in this fragile journey. Henry's favorite chair sat empty at the center, a silent reminder of the man whose choices had shaped the tangled web of lives before them. Amelia took a breath, the mixture of fear and determination tightening in her chest. I'm here, she began, voice steady despite the emotion beneath it, because I want to speak the truth. Not just for myself or for Claire, but for all of us. Claire nodded, her eyes meeting Amelia's with a newfound warmth. We've both been living in shadows cast by silence. It's time to let light in. Margaret stepped forward, her voice calm. Our family's story is complicated. The accidents, the adoptions, the secrets were intended to protect, not destroy. But hiding always breeds distance. Today, we choose a new path. As they spoke openly, the atmosphere shifted. Walls built on years of assumptions and unspoken pain began to crumble, replaced by a tentative but genuine willingness to understand. Relatives who had doubted Amelia's place found themselves confronting their own judgments, realizing how little they had truly understood the complexities beneath the surface. Amelia shared memories of her father, the kindness, the lessons, the quiet strength that had shaped her. Claire spoke softly of her own journey, of feeling lost and abandoned yet yearning for connection. Together, they painted a portrait not of competition, but of two lives intertwined by fate and filled with shared longing. Confronted with the fuller picture, those who had judged Amelia felt the sting of their own mistakes. Apologies flowed, not as formalities, but as heartfelt acknowledgments of hurt caused by doubt and silence. Forgiveness, fragile and raw, began to take root. The family embraced a new understanding: identity is not solely drawn from bloodlines, but from love, experience, and truth shared openly. Amelia felt the uncertain but powerful shift within herself, a reclaiming of self beyond the limits of biology or circumstance. As the afternoon faded into evening, the room felt lighter, the heavy weight of secrecy lifted by the courage of those who chose honesty over comfort. Amelia and Claire, once divided by confusion and pain, now stood united, not as rivals, but as sisters in a broader sense. Before leaving, Amelia looked around the room, her heart swelling with a quiet resolve. "This is only the beginning," she said. "But it's a start." Claire smiled, her eyes bright. "A start of healing. Together." If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. See you in our next story.